Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everybody is having an amazing Tuesday. So, we are getting ready to have Show Me the Shift. And so, I hope everybody is having a great, amazing day. I am Coach Lenora, certified life coach. Uh, and just excited to talk today because the other thing I probably should say is that I'm a SHRM certified, which is the Society of HR Management certified professional as well. So that it gives a little insight into why I give HR topics, which is what I'm going to be giving today. And so I wanted to take some time today to just talk through some of the things that you should not do in an interview, like absolutely should not do in an interview. There are some things that I think people know for sure not to do, like show up late. But then there's other things that I think are a little more behind the scenes, a little bit more not as overt of things that you shouldn't do, and just making sure that people understand those things as well, so that that way you can put your best foot forward. You've already made it to that table to have the interview. That's a big hurdle in itself to make it that far, especially with so many AI things that can hinder people's resumes from even getting to a human. So you've made it past the applicant tracking system. You've now made it to a recruiter. You're in their hands. They've reviewed you. They've deemed you qualified. The hiring leader has deemed you qualified to show up and have an interview. So the last thing you want to do is be at the interview and then do some of these things that you shouldn't do, right? And so based on that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and talk through what some of these do's, well, we'll talk about the don'ts. I have do's and don'ts, but we're going to specifically talk about the don'ts today because I think that's really important. Maybe in a future episode, I'll talk about some of the things that you make sure you absolutely do so that that way you can, again, put your best foot forward and stand out amongst the crowd. And so based on that, we're going to go ahead and talk about probably 10 or so things that you should make sure you don't do. If it goes a little long, I may delay some of these till another time, but I'll try to go through them rather quickly. So first of all, you do not want to speak poorly about your previous employers. So I think sometimes people get wrapped up in having conversations and talking about, oh, I'm leaving this particular job. And then they go on this tangent. I have seen it happen in the interviews that I've been in where they're like, well, my manager was disrespectful and I actually have a lawsuit against them. And this happened and that happened. And I was overseen by these promotions. And even though you may feel as though all of that is absolutely true and accurate, in an interview is not the place or space to share those insights and details about your previous employer. Do not speak negatively about them. At the least, all you would have to say is that, oh, I'm looking for a new opportunity because the current role is no longer in alignment with what it is that I'm looking for my career progression, something to that effect. But you do not have to specifically just, completely, I don't know what the right words to use are, but just to talk negatively and to disparage your current employer. That's the word I was looking for, disparage. So please don't do that. It does not fare well for you as the employee. Number one is, or a future employee, because of the fact that they're going to look at that and say, okay, if they're going to speak this negatively about their current employer in an interview, what would they say about me if they were working here? What would they say about me if they, were leaving my employment and going to work somewhere else and being in an interview? So they're going to see that as a complete red flag. So please, whatever you do, don't talk negatively about your previous employers. Figure out a way to put a good, just even tone conversation. Doesn't have to be something that you feel like I'm not being truthful, because that's not good either, but it's just about not going down that path. Okay. The other thing, as I mentioned, is not arriving late. And for some employers, when you look at hiring leaders, they consider you coming in 5 minutes before, like, being on time is late, you know? So, I always recommend that if you're gonna go and do an interview, number 1, make sure that you arrive in plenty of time because you don't know if there's gonna be issues with parking. Do you have to pay for parking? Do they have parking available for you? Depending on what the location is, sometimes places do have, just a parking lot, so it's easy enough. But if you have a place where it's downtown parking and you are going to be searching around and frantic trying to find a space, you're 5 minutes before, you still need to walk to the building, you haven't found you're going to feel too flustered, too frustrated. Like you're just not going to feel like you're going to be putting your best foot forward. So I always say, arrive 20 minutes early, like get there, get comfortable, like breathe, and be in the lobby maybe 10 or 15 minutes beforehand. Not to say that, you're pressing them or rushing them to speak with you, but just letting them know that you're not a last minute person, that you're not someone who's just going to come in disheveled, rushed, sweating profusely, and all of that. Like just put your best foot forward and get there in a timely manner, right? Okay. And then the other thing is, this one's a tough one because I feel like most people probably wouldn't go down this path. However, I have had someone say this and I kind of pushed back. But anyway, I'll say what it is, but don't say, I don't know. If you're in an interview, there's a question that has stumped you, right? There's something that you're just like, I don't know how to answer this particular question. I don't know what I would say to this. Instead of just saying, well, I don't know. Can we pass that question, right? I don't know. Can we come back to it later, right? Instead, just take a moment, take a beat, because what I have found is that if you don't know the answer to a question, you can ask them to repeat it, of course, but also what I have found is that if you just take a moment because you're so flustered to feel like I have to answer it immediately. I have to answer it right as soon as they ask it. But if you take a second and say, can you repeat the question? Think about it. Take a moment to formulate a response to that question. Oftentimes, if you're hitting that question on the mark, no one in giving that answer perfectly, no one is going to really pay attention to the fact that you took an extra 30 seconds, 45 seconds to formulate your response to that question. So if you, instead of saying, I don't know, simply say something to the effect of, give me a moment to think about that. And then take the moment to think about it. And then when you come up with what your right response is to that question, 9 times out of 10, nobody's going to remember that pause because of the fact that you just felt so flustered to just say, well, I don't know. But that's not really the right response. More than likely, it's your experience, right? It's your history. You're very familiar with the experiences that you've had, the things that you've done in your past. You just might not feel in that moment that you have the recall to be able to speak to it quickly and effectively. So therefore, just take the second, take the moment. And then when you give that response, if it's right on spot, nobody's going to remember that you took that a little bit of time. If it's not on spot, at least if it's not perfect, at least you'll know, hey, I took a moment, I took a beat, and I gave them the best answer I possibly could give in that moment without saying, I don't know. Okay. So that's something to think about because I have had a candidate once before I distinctly remember where they just said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I have an answer to that question. And when you say that, like, okay, we move on. But that in itself is just a reflection of the fact that 9 times out of 10, this person isn't going to get the job because they didn't even attempt to try to answer that question. And so the other thing is, and this is funny too, a lot of introverts sometimes will do this because they're just so uncomfortable. But please try not to give one sentence answers to the questions. Oftentimes, there are questions that are looking for various kind of parts to the answer. So it could be tell me about a time you did this and what was the result. And if you're only saying, oh yeah, I ended up helping a customer and they were happy in the end, then that doesn't give the full picture, right? That doesn't give, well, what was your interaction? What was your engagement? What did you offer this customer when they weren't happy to help them to get to the point of being happy at the end? So making sure that you're not just 1-2 sentences and done. but going through and truly trying to share all the specifics of that situation to show how your best side showed, how you shine through and helped that situation, help that customer, built out that project, led that team, any of those types of things that you did, just making sure that you're giving more specifics in regards to your experience with that particular situation. All right. Another thing is interrupting the interviewer. I've seen this happen as well. And most of these things I've just seen happen. That's why they're on the list, right? And so there was a situation where an interviewer, as they were trying to answer a question, as the interviewee was trying to answer the question, the candidate, the interviewer had a follow-up question. And as the interviewer, who was like a high-level leader in the organization, was trying to ask their probing question, the candidate interrupted them and said, "I'm getting to that." And I just sat there like, what is happening right now? Right. So just making sure that you're not interrupting the person who's interviewing you and making the hiring decisions, because that did not farewell for that particular candidate. It also showed just a very aggressive nature to this person, where we too, at the end, talking about the candidate and the experience, it's kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, well, is this a person, right? Is this a behavior that we feel would be a part of our culture? Is this a behavior that we feel as though our leaders would appreciate? And if they wouldn't, then is this a person that we would hire? Right. And so, but yeah, that was very interesting. But just interrupting the interviewer, feeling like, oh, I already know the answer. It's not Jeopardy or, anything where you have to buzz in first, right? Give the person the time to ask the full question, and then at the end, be able to give your response. And if they do have probing questions, just ensuring that you're not speaking over somebody, interrupting them, or making them feel as though you're discounting what they're trying to say in that moment, because they are interviewing you at that particular time. Okay, using slang, using overly casual language, using language that references profanity, any of those things, of course, are absolutely not appropriate in an interview. However, again, I have had those situations happen. I actually had a candidate one time who used the reference, and I won't say what it stands for, but they just said, it was one of those situations where we were SOL. And I was just like, I think I know what SOL means, and not standards of learning. I'll just put it that way. And so based on that, I was like, okay, so that is a reference to profanity, in an interview that they're using. So what is their typical language as an employee if they were to work here? Those are the types of things that interviewers are going to be thinking about and keeping in mind. So again, making sure that you are not utilizing any kind of slang, any kind of extremely casual language. All right. Then we're going to say to the next thing. So we talked about a moment ago, not saying one sentence answers, right? Or two sentence answers to questions, especially when they're very detailed questions. But we also don't want to over explain as well. There are times where one question gets, I can't even talk, well, let's just say asked, one question gets asked to the candidate. And then the next thing you know, 10 minutes later, they're still explaining that situation. Now, sometimes it's because of the fact that the person is very, uncomfortable, right? Interviews aren't always a comfortable situation to be in. Most people hate interviews. However, to ramble on and on and on, then that makes it seem even more like you're not focused, that you're not someone who can figure out how to formulate your thoughts in such a way that you can be clear and concise. And so therefore, you want to make sure that you are not rambling, basically, answering the question, being focused, sharing what you need to share to answer what the question was, and not over explaining. Because sometimes I feel like when people over explain, they're trying to overcompensate. They feel as though maybe they're not quite qualified for this role. And so therefore, let me go ahead and over explain how I handled the situation, what I did, and then therefore maybe it'll make me seem like I'm more qualified. But instead, it typically does the opposite. It makes it seem as though you really don't have all of the ability to be able to concisely share your information and your thoughts. So, another thing to kind of think about there. We have here, of course, with cell phones being what they are, just make sure you put your phones on silent. Make sure that that's not gonna, go off in the middle of the interview. Pretty much self-explanatory. I won't spend much time there. Everybody should know not to do this, but I'm gonna go ahead and share it anyway. Do not lie. Do not over exaggerate your experience. Don't do it. It will reflect itself in one way or another. It will come to light, right? Oftentimes you are in the room with the subject matter experts of that particular area of business. So therefore, trying to over exaggerate, trying to lie, trying to say that you've done some things that you haven't done, oftentimes as those probing questions start, what's going to happen? The answers to those questions are going to prove that certain things that were said or on the resume weren't necessarily as accurate as, I won't say, lying, but weren't as accurate as you're trying to make it appear. So absolutely don't do those things, because lying and exaggerating, it's just, number one, why go into a role that you're not really suited for and qualified for? It just adds extra pressure to you as the person going into that role to try to perform at a task that really you're not suited to perform. And so why not just be accurate, be truthful, and have the true you shine through? Okay, we're going to move on to at the end of the interview, just make sure that you don't say that you don't have any questions. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, actually. When I would interview, I would be a little frustrated when people would get to the end of the interview and you're like, okay, so what questions do you have for us? And they're like, no, nothing. I think we covered everything. I have heard that more times than you can imagine. And I would say maybe 40% of the interviews that I've held in all the years that I've been in HR, maybe even more, have ended with a person saying, and mind you, a lot of times I was interviewing HR people and they would still say, no questions. I'm good. I think we covered everything. Thank you for your time. That's it. And in a way, it shows a little bit of disinterest. Like, I sometimes wonder, like, oh, it was something from the questions that we asked that made them feel as though they're really not even as interested in this position as they were when they sat down in the chair, because they didn't have any follow-up questions. And this was their time to interview us, because that's really what the question section is, right? For the candidate, is their time to interview the leader. Excuse me, because if you think about it, interviews are a two-way street, right? The beginning is them making sure that you are a fit for their organization, but towards the end, it's you making sure that this company is a place that you want to work. And so based on that, I always say, make sure that you ask questions. It can be simple questions. It could be things like, oh, at the beginning, I remembered you saying that you've been here for 7 years. Can you let me know a little bit about what you enjoy working here? Asking them why they are there. Asking them, what is their leadership style? Asking so many questions that you can ask, not just about, oh, when does the training start? How long will it take before I hear something? Like, those are questions that people can ask as well, but really probing into, like, oh, I saw that the company's mission was this. If I were to get employed, how quickly, or is there any kind of probationary period before I can start volunteering? Is there any, it can be anything, but just making sure that you ask some level of questions so that way the employers know, number one, that they didn't say something during the interview to make you now no longer interested. Number two, it proves how interested you are. And it does give you an opportunity sometimes to highlight that you've done your research on the company, maybe even research on the employer themselves. And then it gives you that ability to be able to ensure that this company is the right fit for you. Because sometimes culturally, you'll realize that, you know what, this isn't a place that I would really want to work based on how they answered these questions or based on the way that this leader mentioned their leadership style. Maybe it's a little more micromanaging than what you would prefer. And so therefore, would I want to go ahead and work for somebody who might want to hover a little bit over me versus allowing me to do the work that I need to do once I'm fully equipped and ready to do that job effectively. So that's another thing to think about. And the last thing I'll say is just making sure that you do thank them at the end. So, just the no of that or the don't of that is don't just walk away and, just say thank you, but shaking hands, saying thank you for the time, the opportunity, for giving me a chance to speak with you and share my experience and skills, all of those things. Just thank them for their time and their consideration of you as a candidate. And this is something that you can do whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in person, right? I mean, the shaking the hands part, of course, you can't do through Zoom, but letting them know how much you appreciate their time and taking away time from their busy day to speak with you and talk to you about your desire to work with their organization is huge as well. So, on that note, those are all of the wonderful things that I wanted to share in regards to what you should not do when you are interviewing. So, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out, DM, connect with me. One of the things that I have actually on my site, which is coachedbylenora.com, is a 20 things recruiters would tell you if they could. So, it's a 20 things. So, it's basically things that they wish they could tell you, but they can't because they're recruiting and they're hiring for certain roles. And now that I'm out of that field, I can share some of these kind of behind the curtain information and ideas and tips and techniques that you can use so that way you can put your best foot forward as you apply to opportunities. So again, it is the 20 things that recruiters wish they could tell you, but they can't. So if you're interested, that is actually in my bio. So in my profile, you can connect there and see that guide. Otherwise, I hope everybody has an amazing Tuesday. Thank you so much for your time and consideration in watching Show Me the Shift. And we'll be back tomorrow. And tomorrow's episode will be about content creation on Winning Wednesday. So what kind of products and content can we create? All right, everybody, have an amazing rest of your Wednesday, and we'll connect again soon. Take care.